This video will be a nervous system introduction. Neurons are the functional unit of the nervous system. Those are cells that communicate using electrical impulses or action potentials. And neurons usually don't divide. So here's a cartoon neuron. You can see the cell body, and then there's the nucleus where you'd find the DNA. These projections are called dendrites, and this long projection, sometimes called a nerve fiber, is called an axon, and it's surrounded by this myelin sheath. And then here's the terminal axons, or the ends that will communicate with effectors, other glands or other muscles or other neurons. Here's a neuron under a microscope. Here's a neuron, and then here's the axon. Here's these other projections called dendrites. It's hard to distinguish which is which. We won't have to do that under a microscope. But then these other cells, these are the nuclei of the neuroglia, or glial cells. We talked about those before. Those aren't neurons in the sense that they don't propagate action potentials. They just are there to support the neurons, and they support them by providing nutrients and insulation or myelin, and also physical support. These generally are able to divide. The synapse. The synapse occurs between two adjacent structures, usually neurons, and that's how they communicate with each other. So you notice that this is the axon, this is the direction of the impulse, and this is that synaptic terminal or axon terminal. Here it is under larger magnification. So you can see that these two neurons aren't physically connected, but they are sort of functionally connected in the sense that the action potential can continue to be propagated from one neuron to the next using these chemical messengers or neurotransmitters. And we saw that before when we saw acetylcholine was released from the synaptic terminal, and that affected the muscle at the neuromuscular junction. So in this particular cartoon, this is just a generic neurotransmitter, but remember we saw acetylcholine. There's other neurotransmitters like epinephrine and norepinephrine and serotonin. Here's one under an electron microscope. This is the end of the axon, and all these little yellow buds are vesicles that are going to be releasing neurotransmitters into this synaptic cleft, and this would be an adjacent neuron. Here's some terminology you need to be familiar with. A nerve is nothing more than a bundle of axons or a bundle of nerve fibers. So anytime you hear nerve, you always want to think of just a bundle of long axons. So here's an example of a nerve. This is the humerus here. This is the radius and ulna. And then this is the medial epicondyle. We learned about that. Medial epicondyle of the humerus. The ulnar nerve runs right in a groove there, and then runs down to your pinky and the next finger as well. So this would be thousands of axons all bundled together, and it's called a nerve. Let's look at how the nervous system is organized. It's organized into the central nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord, and then also the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system contains the nerves that connect the central nervous system to the rest of the body. And there's 12 cranial nerves that come off of the brain, and there's 31 pairs of spinal nerves that exit through the foramen that we saw on the vertebral column. So this sort of flow chart here is organized anatomically. Some charts are organized functionally. Some incorporate both anatomical and functional attributes, but there really is no perfect way to diagram something as complex as the nervous system, but nonetheless, these diagrams can be helpful. So here's the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. And then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is composed of the sensory division and the motor division. And within the motor division, we have the somatic nervous system, which actuates or acts on skeletal muscles. And then we have the autonomic nervous system, which will synapse with smooth muscle. Remember, you have smooth muscle in the walls of some of your organs, like the walls surrounding blood vessels, and also in the uterus and in the respiratory passageways, and then cardiac muscle in the heart, and then glands, whether it be like a salivary gland or adrenal gland, something like that. So an overview of the nervous system is that input is received and then responded to. So for example, here we have sensory receptors. These would be sensing what's going on either in the external environment or within the body as well. And then when an impulse is sent to the brain or spinal cord, it's sent through the peripheral nervous system, and it's part of the sensory nervous system. And then in the brain, it's integrated. That's where two or more sort of components come together, or a signal's transduced, and then an action potential or impulse is sent to the motor division, and it may affect like a skeletal muscle, or it might affect something that you don't have control over, something involuntary like a gland or like the beating of your heart. So the general functions of the nervous system we kind of already talked about, but we can divide it into sensory. That's provided by receptors at the ends of peripheral neurons, which gather information and convert to a nerve impulse and send it towards the central nervous system. Anytime you have an action potential, an impulse traveling towards the central nervous system, we call that afferent. You'll see that word quite a bit. So here's an example of sensory. We have a receptor that's located in the skin. It's poked with a needle, and then an impulse travels through this sensory neuron. This here represents the cell body of the neuron. This would be like axon and dendrite. And then we have integration. Integration is where impulses come together in the central nervous system, and that's where your brain forms sensations and memories and thoughts and perceptions. In this case, our neural pathway is very simple, and it doesn't even travel to the brain. It travels just within the spinal cord. These are called interneurons. So these are neurons that exist between sensory and motor neurons, and they're found within the spinal cord and in the brain. And then we have the motor division, or the motor function. That's when impulses are conducted away from the central nervous system. We call that efferent. So we have afferent, which is towards the central nervous system, and efferent, which is away from the central nervous system. So this would be the sensory neuron. This would be the interneuron in green, and then this pink one is the motor neuron. And then the space in between the blue and the green and the pink, those are synapses. That's what we talked about before, where neurotransmitters are released. So if you were to get pricked with a needle, that would travel to your central nervous system and then away from your central nervous system, and then the reflex might be to pull away from that pinprick. Remember that the motor division is divided into two parts, the somatic and the autonomic. And the somatic division, that is an area that you have voluntary control over, chiefly skeletal muscles. And the autonomic nervous system, that's under involuntary control, meaning you don't have any control over it. So examples would be like if your heart rate is accelerated or slowed down as a response to something, you don't have control over that. The smooth muscle of your small intestine for digestion, you really can't control how fast you digest food. Other examples would be like if the light switch is turned on and your pupil dilates, that's an autonomic or involuntary response. Or if you're startled and your adrenal gland releases epinephrine or adrenaline, that's something you don't have control over either. So basically, somatic is skeletal muscle, and autonomic is stuff you don't have control over. So here's another way, it's a similar way of breaking down the nervous system, sort of anatomically and functionally sort of together. But we basically have the nervous system, which is composed of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system includes both sensory neurons and motor neurons. And the motor neurons are divided up into somatic and autonomic. And of course, you also have like sensory receptors in your muscles as well. So there is some overlap here with some of these categories. Remember, this is an imperfect way to represent the nervous system. And then furthermore, the autonomic nervous system is divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. You've probably heard these before, but your sympathetic division is associated with the flight or fight response. So that gets your body amped up to either run away or to fight. And then you have the parasympathetic division, which is usually called rest and digest. So after you eat a meal, your parasympathetic division is stimulated, and that will accelerate digestion and things like that.